Hi, everybody. This is Kathy L. Murphy. Hang with me 1 second because we are going also live on Facebook. Here we go. It takes a few minutes for for this to go live. Yeah, there we go. It's going. Streaming.
I don't know why this always makes me so nervous to do these things.
I don't know why it does. I was telling my sister, I've done over 200 of these, and I still get pins and needles every time I do this, hoping that it'll all go well. So there we go. There we are. Now I'm coming back to here.
You got a haircut, Carolyn.
Yeah.
I did. Yeah.
You did, and it's cute.
Thanks.
It's really cute. I'm glad
it's a lot easier.
I'm glad you found somebody that's open during this time of COVID because my hair is so long. I just have to knot it up and all these things and tie it up with a scarf. But here we are, everybody, for our online international book club meeting. And we've got authors from all over the country. So I'm going to start because Randy, this is the first time we've had you on board. I'm going to just introduce everybody and then we'll introduce Carolyn. So Randy, tell us about yourself up here in Colorado.
Yep, I live in Denver, Colorado. This is my old house. I live in an old house from 1890. And it's just kind of fun. I'm very excited to see what you all are doing. And I'm very glad to be part of this group. And I'm a writer and I have like 3 books out currently and I'm on contract for 4 more. So it's just sort of like,
congratulations.
Life's working along.
What kind of books are you writing?
I started out with historical fiction and then I sold the research I did for the historical fiction book into a Colorado history book. And then I just signed with Wolfpack Publishing and they want contemporary Westerns from a female perspective. So when I saw your book, I was very interested in seeing what you were doing. And I like paranormal and all that stuff in New Orleans. So I was all excited to hear what you had to say. So yeah, so I'm basically writing some variety of Westerns, shall we say, but not like the 1950s guys type of Westerns. I'm not doing that.
Well, we're excited.
Good stuff.
Yeah. So
Thank you.
Sarah, you're next. Introduce yourself.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I'm sorry with my glasses. I'm trying to get them not to blind everyone. Hi, I am so happy to be selected for the 2022 one of the books in December. And my novel Pause, if I can do a little brag, there it is. Yeah, it's getting some good attention. This is my 6th published novel and there's a bunch more in drawers. I'm a traveler, adventurer, outdoors person, and a lot of that finds its way into my writing. And yeah, I just have arranged with Village Books in Bellingham, the famous Village Books, for my party for the book in November.
Nice.
Yay, wonderful. Welcome, welcome, welcome. And we have Eileen Sanchez. And I have to mention that Eileen just had a big post. She has donated 50 copies of her book to the Pat Conroy Center for this school project. Tell us quickly about that too, Eileen.
Well, when I found out about the DALO group and the work that they were doing, it just aligned so much with the message from my book to have conversations, to open up, you know, to take a look at the diversity in our world and learn about other people. And so it's the anniversary of my book coming up in November, and I'm just celebrating. I was so glad that they could use the books, and they're going to help spread the message that about the book. Just
and what kind of book do you write?
Well, this was my first debut.
Right.
It's historical fiction. It's based on this mandated school integration in 1969 in the Deep South, and it's based in part on my experience there. So,
Freedom lessons.
Yes.
It's a fabulous read. And Wandra Chang just joined us tonight, and we're happy to have you back, Wandra.
Hi.
Tell us quickly about your book, and then we're going to begin with our program.
Okay. My book titled Sonju was launched in July this year, and I'm working very hard to market it.
You're doing a great job, and we're so excited. All of you will be featured at our big up-and-coming 2022 International Book Club Convention and Girlfriend Weekend. But tonight, we have a friend, an author that goes back decades with Carolyn Haynes. I fell in love with her very Southern Gothic books when she first started years ago, back in my early bookseller days. And we've come a long way, haven't we, Carolyn?
We have been over some rough and bumpy roads.
And you've written like 80 books, and you
I've
have
published 80 books. Yeah.
It's absolutely amazing. And you're here tonight to talk to us about your books. And so I'm going to have you pretend that nobody's read your books right now, because this is all being recorded. It's live on Facebook. We want everybody to know about you and your backstory and how this writing life came possible. She also, I must mention, is a recipient of the Harper Lee a very coveted award that was thrilled that she won. So anyway, go ahead, Carolyn, tell us all about you.
Well, I started out as a journalist. My parents were journalists, and I started working for the newspapers when I was 12. And that's a macabre experience for a 12-year-old kid, to photograph wrecks on the highway, drownings, all kind of stuff. But, you know, that's just how it was. And I was in it to win it too, baby. I loved it. So I worked for the news media for about 10 years. I covered legislatures in the South and features, some investigative reporting, but I'm not a great investigative reporter. I don't have that killer instinct. But one of the things that made me turn to fiction was I was working for a weekly in Lucedale in between daily jobs. And, you know, every week I would go to the courthouse in my little town and get the jail docket. And it was just who had been arrested and what they were charged with and how it was disposed of, if they were held over for trial or out on bond or whatever was going on with them. Simple fact sheet. So I would, you know, copy it all down, go back to the paper, and they'd run it on the front page, because this was, you know, news in the little county. And there was a classmate of mine who was arrested for armed robbery. So I didn't think, you know, I just put it in the paper. Well, I got a call from his family. And they said that there was a flying saucer had landed at their dairy farm and knocked down a whole bunch of trees. And they needed somebody to come out and photograph it. So, buddy, I was all over that. I was on it. And as it turned out, there was no flying saucer. His mother had lured me into a trap. And she tried to kill me with a rake.
Oh my God. Oh my God.
Look, she was furious. She was absolutely furious that because, you know, once your name is in the paper, it does seem that you're guilty. Yes. And I understand that. And what she told me, though, completely turned upside down how I looked at things. She said, "You don't know anything. He did attempt to rob that grocery store. He needs money. His son is dying of leukemia, and they won't give him treatment because he doesn't have the money to pay for it. So yes, he did it." And I realized then that motivation is the heart of every story. And in the newspaper, it's just the facts. You can't get into motivation. It's not my job to try to explain why people do what they do in a news article. And that was when I first really started writing short. I wanted to write short stories. I wanted to be man because I was deeply under the influence of Flannery O'Connor and Eudora Welty.
Aw,
So,
Well, your
but
writing
from
is
there,
fantastic.
you know, I just went in a lot of, I grew up in a town without a bookstore. So I worked in a hospital pharmacy, as a clerk, a sales clerk. And they had a spinning rack of books. And I was such an avid reader, and they told me that I could read any book there as long as I didn't break the spine or get,
Right.
you know, make it look dirty. So I'd start at the top, which had the little sweet harlequins,
Yeah.
and I would work my way down, and you go through, you know, the sweet romance. And at the time, Mary Stuart and the Gothic romances were very big also.
Yeah,
So
I
I'd read
remember
all
that.
the, I'd work my way down to the more mystery or crime, stuff like that, work my way down further. And eventually, close to the bottom was literary fiction. And I read some incredible writers like John Irving, people I'd never heard of. In
I
those
love
days.
John Irving. Yeah.
Just, yeah, oh, he's brilliant. Just fabulous writers. And then at the very bottom, if I still had time, I got to read The Men's Adventure. So I truly read everything, and I had no one to tell me, this is good literature, this is bad literature. It was just what I enjoyed. And I understand now that I am a writer, but I'm far more of a storyteller. I really love that tradition of good story. And you can dress it up in any genre you want to, but a good story is a good story. And if your story it does not have a forward-moving plot, you do not have a story. So, I mean, that's just the way I look at it. So
And that's the way I look at it too, because I don't try to, people say, oh, do you pick self-publish or, small publisher? I go, if it's a good story, I don't care who publishes it. And I've always
Right.
said that, always, even when
Readers
I was a book
don't care.
publisher's rep, and I've actually helped some authors get published because I thought they had a good story to tell. So I am right there with you, Carolyn, but you've done so many different things. And if you all are really paying attention, you'll see she's the biggest animal advocate as Mandy Haines and I, because there's her pooch laying behind her.
as they stream by behind me.
I know. I love it. I love it. I love all the books in your house. So you started with first these novels. I mean, I remember that I read them and they weren't coming out fast enough. And now you've gone on to series, and you've written in several different genres, but everything you write is just interesting no matter what the genre for me. So how has your writing evolved as you've been, you've written 80 books. That's a lot of books. And I'm trying to figure
published
out.
80.
Go ahead. I'm
I
trying to.
said she's published 80, so there's probably,
Oh yeah.
There are some in drawers. Yeah. There are some under the bed and some in drawers. I'm a fast writer. I'm a consumer of fiction. And since I like everything, the way I view it is an idea for a story is a gift. It is a gift from the gods of creativity or literature or whatever. So then it's my job to tell that story the best way I can. And it doesn't matter to the story whether it's labeled suspense,
Exactly.
horror, romance. It doesn't matter to the story at all what it's called. What matters to the story is that it's told to the very best of my ability. So whatever idea comes into my head, I just let it stew till I know what it is. And then I figure out how to tell it. Now I have and this is for you writers, this may or may not be interesting, but I have a really scary book called The Darkling. It took me 25 years to write that book. I wrote it, I know 10 times. And when I finally went back to it a couple of years ago, I had a critique group that I worked with all this time. And I said, hey guys, I'm gonna go back to the Darkling. And they're like, no, we've read that book too many times. And it really is kind of scary. But I was teaching at South Alabama. I was teaching at the university. I was teaching fiction writing. And what I used to do in the classes is we'd write, and then I'd pick a particular topic like sex scenes or horror or whatever. And we would read two contrasting books, one more literary and one more commercial. So for horror, we read Joe Hill's The Heart-Shaped Box.
Yeah.
Straight up commercial horror fiction. So we could look at the elements and how it was put together and how it functioned and that kind of thing. And then we also read Sarah Waters, Sarah Waters, The Little Stranger, which is a literary horror. And in teaching that book, I finally figured out how to tell the story of the Darkling and it would never have occurred to my little pea brain, with an unreliable narrator. That was the only way to tell that story and tell it properly. And once I knew that, I wrote the book in like 3 months, after 25 years of struggling with it.
Well, how apropos that you would have your black cat jump up and
Oh, this is Karma. Yeah.
Karma.
My sweet little Karma.
Oh,
With her big
Karma.
green eyes.
Oh, I love it. I love it. So, well, how wonderful. And when did that book come out, Carolyn?
It came out in, I think, 2004 with Pegasus Press out of New York.
Good
So, yeah.
And where do you think that interest comes from? That you get into some pretty, interesting perceptions on your books. Where does that come from? Where does that dark side come from?
I always enjoyed reading dark fiction, and to me, my better writing is in the darker books rather than in the more humorous books, because the humor stories are more, they move faster. There's not enough time to really explore language as much as I want to. Or that's just me. That doesn't make it true for everybody or any other writer. That's just true for me.
Well, what I like about it is I hate that we get, as authors, put into boxes. Because I remember when my book put out, they put my book out as self-help because it says Guide to Life, which is a memoir, and I remember I was next to Dr. Phil on the shelf, and I just thought, this is not any place where I ever thought I would be if I wrote a book. So I think it's neat that you switch genres and and it just shows how multi-talented you are as a storyteller. And I think if we're gifted in one thing, we're gifted in more than one thing. So there goes your little Karma.
I know.
I love it. They get a little jealous when we get to talking to other people, don't they?
They do. And there are 15 cats in this house. So
can you
Hey,
believe
guys, and
that?
how many dogs?
I have 6 dogs and 2 horses.
Yep, you've got a few. My sister has quite a few little kitties herself, and I'm down to 3. I'm down to 3 cats. So, but we all love the animals. So when the books you're working on now are the Trouble series, you're working on those series, and you're going to be talking about that at our with the authors at our annual convention too. So and how is that process different from your other writings of your books when you're working on these series?
With cat books, there are multiple authors.
Yes.
And that's, we share the cat. We share the cat who has
share
a
the cat.
voice. He doesn't talk, but he thinks. And he is addicted to Benedict Cumberbatch as Sherlock Holmes. So he thinks with a slight British accent.
I love it.
I know. I mean, it's insane. The cat, though, every author tells a story. It's a
Yes.
mystery with a little bit of romance. But I'm also doing the Pluto Snitch series, which A Visitation of Angels is part of.
Right.
And I'm working on a Sarah Booth Christmas book right now. So
Unbelievable. And so when do you get up early? I know you do.
I
You
do
get
get
up-
up early.
Because if you have animals, you're going to get up early. So do you write at a certain time of the day or just off and on, or do you have a routine?
If I'm disciplined, I'll go out and feed the horses and take care of all the animals and do all that. And then I sit down and I do not read my email and I
Right.
do not go to Facebook. I sit down and I write till I get 1,000 or 1,500 words, and then I can do the other stuff. But if I'm being the slacker that I can be, I go do Facebook and emails and then fall down the rabbit hole till noon. when I'm caught up in-
For the Pulpwood Queen
Yeah.
Presents.
So
you
I just,
know,
I
do
have
that
to
too.
make myself up.
Well, we are very fortunate to have you talking to us and you taught for how many years in the
I taught for
college?
14 years.
14 years.
I was hired for 1 year and I told them, I said, look, I'll give you a year, find another teacher. I have a lot of book contracts and I need to
Yeah.
write. And I taught that 1 year and they never found another teacher and I loved it. I loved my students. I really did. And I just stayed. I stayed a whole lot longer than I ever intended to. But I enjoyed it and a lot of my students got published and it was good. And, you know, I gave them a realistic look at the world of publishing, which,
Good.
yeah.
It's tough. It's really tough out there right now. And that's why this year we had so many submissions for I've never received quite this many books as I did, well over 1,000, and they're still pouring in. And that's a lot of reading for Mandy and I to do this year, but we're still at task. We're still working on it. But you have spent a lifetime doing this. And I know from your teaching our writing, we have a writers club that meets usually the second Saturday of every month. And yours was so enjoyable on how you talked about the different, aspects of writing and plot and things. I've learned so much from this writing club thing. So as you proceed ahead with all these series and everything, do you have a big all-time goal for your writing life?
No. In a word, I am just enjoying the process. I
It's a
truly
journey.
just enjoy writing. It is my escape. And it's so a lot of the readers of Sarah Booth, because I'm working on the 25th book in the series. And
Wow.
that's what it's about, usually 1 or 2 a year. So I've been writing these characters for 25 years. And they've only aged a year and 3/4. That is so unfair. It is so damn unfair.
I love it. I love
But
it.
it is, it's such a compliment to me when people say to me, I really miss Sarah Booth. She's like family. I need a visit from her. And so that, I love writing those books because there's when I go into that world, I know everything about it. I've been there for 25 years and it is like going home in many ways, but it's an escape from the horrors of day-to-day life.
No kidding.
It's horrible.
No kidding,
Can I
baby.
add, can I
Go ahead.
add a quick note, Carolyn? I wasn't familiar with your stories, but I just checked to see which one I could get. And the first one of your bone series, the first page, I just went, my God, I have to read this. It starts something about, all the women in my family have womb issues, and the men that are either more interested in guns or drinking, I guess, bottles. Yeah. Anyway, I love your voice. And
Thank you. And it is, it's very Southern. It's interesting to me because I was thinking today, because I have a ghost from slavery times, Jitty. And I was wondering if I could sell that series today. And I don't know that I could. I don't know that I could. But it's such an established thing. And it's become very clear through the books that Jitty is truly Sarah Booth's subconscious. And that there's a little Arthur trickery going on.
Everybody has a little inside story. So can you tell everybody, Harper Lee, To Kill a Mockingbird, we just watched it this last Saturday for our book and film club. It's my favorite story, favorite book, favorite, author, favorite film. And then you win this award, which, I've thought about moving to Alabama just so that maybe I could start writing like crazy, and that's kind of a big dream. But what was that experience like for you, winning that award?
It's funny because I got one foot in Mississippi and one foot in Alabama.
Right.
A lot of my writing is set in Mississippi because that's what I know, where I grew up.
Right.
I know how things work there. Alabama is a totally different legislative experience. I mean, Alabama has home rule. You can't pass a law in Mobile without getting the whole state to approve it. It's insane. It's totally insane. But it's Harper Lee, for me, that book changed the way I looked at the world.
Me too.
It was iconic in many ways. And when I first started out writing short stories, I had an agent from the agency that she was represented by.
Oh.
And so I felt this very close kinship. And she's a storyteller. She's not a writer. She is a storyteller. And that's all I ever wanted to be. And so to be honored in that way was just really wonderful. Alabama's been very good to me in a lot. I was inducted into the Hall of Fame year before last. We didn't do it last year because of COVID. They have been so good to acknowledge my work and support me.
Well, I hope I'm supporting you too, because I think the
Yeah,
world
absolutely.
of you and your books, and I'm always excited when you have something new to share with us and everything. I'm going to open up the conversation to all of you. I know some of you are just being introduced to Carolyn, but this is the wonderful thing about our book club. You may be famous in your part of the world, but we're trying to show the world our authors to make them know that, a good story is a good story no matter where you're from. So anybody have any? Yes, Mandy Haines, of course you do.
Carolyn, I want to ask you about the book that you wrote, My Mother's Witness, the Peggy Morgan story. Because it's so, this just goes y'all to show what we're talking about, how she writes by everything. Will you tell a little bit about that story?
Yeah, I will. And it's the only nonfiction book I'll ever do. I can assure you of that. Peggy Morgan was a local woman here in Mobile who tracked me down at my job in PR at the university and said, I want you to write my story. And I told her, I said, I don't do nonfiction, I write fiction. She said, look, will you just let me tell you my story? This was a woman who grew up in the Mississippi Delta. Her father was involved in the murder of Emmett Till, and her husband was involved with the people who killed oh my God, why do I have these blanks? The NAACP worker. He was shot in his garage. I'll think it'll come to my brain
I know who you're talking about. Okay.
in a minute. Yeah. Is it Everett? No. Anyway, it'll come when I don't need it. But it was a kind of crazy and fascinating story of the absolute horror and repression of the women who attached themselves to these men. She married her husband because he looked like Elvis. When she was having their first child on a plantation without power, he was supposed to go get the midwife, and he came back with his drinking buddies so they could bet when the baby would be born. Her mother, this apparently very sweet woman who had a passel of young'uns, and all she ever wanted was the shift robe in a local store. And she carried it home on her back walking when she finally saved up the money to get it. And she ended up, her husband beat her, Peggy's father beat her so severely that she ended up with epilepsy and froze to death in a ditch.
Oh my God. Her mother.
And the thing that stayed with me about Peggy was in grammar school, she would sit by the window in the classroom so she could listen for the sirens in case her father had beaten her mother again and the ambulance was going there. It was one of the hardest things I've ever done, was to sit with her and listen to her story. It's a really, really good book, but it's so dark. It's so very dark.
But you did write it. Yeah.
I did write it.
It take for you to get all the information together, like to visit with her before you had enough to write the story?
Look, I pretty much channeled Peggy. I wrote it from that intimate point of view.
Wow.
It was her story, not mine.
Yeah.
But the thing that came from that is Sarah Booth and the Mississippi Delta. And, because in researching Peggy, I spent a lot of time in the Delta, in Money, Mississippi, where Emmett Till was killed. Medgar Evers. Thank you, Carolyn.
That's it. That's it.
No, he was shot in his driveway in Jackson by Byron Della Beckwith. Beckwith was tried twice in the state of Mississippi, hung jury both times. Then something like 30 years later, he was finally tried and convicted of the murder, and Peggy testified against him.
Wow. That had to have been scary.
And she said, walking up to that stand, she was terrified. She was terrified. She said, walking up to that stand, her mother never got to tell her story. And she was going to do this for her mother. She was going to testify for her mom.
Woo! I read all about it. I actually ordered it finally. I kept thinking, what have I forgot to do?
Tell that title
like 8
again.
months I've been trying to remember to order that book, but it's on its way. I just thought of that when you were coming up this week, and I was like, that's one that I haven't read and you don't hear that much about, because when I found that C-SPAN interview,
Yep.
because I was just like, so I'm watching that and I can't stop watching it. And then I was like, this is Carolyn Haynes. This is my sister. I know we're related. I know, like somehow our names, the Y and the I.
Somebody got smart and changed a vowel, which brings me to mind. When I first got my agent, I was like 24. And I called New York because I had turned my stories in and I hadn't heard anything in 2 weeks. Now, I'm a journalist.
2 weeks.
I'm a journalist. I expect to get an answer because I'm on a daily deadline. 2 weeks, it's an eternity for me. So I would dial and hang up. Oh, rotary phones, dial and hang up, dial and hang up. And finally I got my spine and the phone, I let it ring through, and a British woman answered the phone. And it completely undid me. I had not expected to hear someone from England answer the phone in a New York agent's office. And she said, "May I help you?" And I said, "I don't know. I'm calling to find out if Miss Fallowfield is going to represent me." And she said, "What's your name?" I said, "Carolyn Haynes." She said, "Could you spell that?" I said, H-A-I. She said, "Young lady, I can't understand you." And I said, like, "I," and she said, "I'm sorry, I can't understand what you're saying." And I'm like, "Ah," "I can't understand you at all." I said, "It's a vowel. A, E, ah." She said, "Where are you calling from?" And by then I'm totally flustered. And I said, "All the way from Mississippi." And she put the phone down and I heard it. And she went over to Julie and she said, "Julie, there is a young woman calling you all the way from Mississippi. I think you should talk to her."
God, that's a great story.
I was so mortified. Really. I wanted to hide under the bed. Oh,
Well, did she talk to you?
yeah, she took me on.
Did you all hear that? Yeah, I hope everybody out there heard that story. That's a great story. I love it, Carolyn. But you know, you have to get out of your comfort zone, but you have to be polite. You know? Yeah, you have to be yourself and polite. And you were,
You know, but just look back. This is 35 years ago. It was a different world. The
oh
world,
my gosh, that's
bigger.
great.
It's so much smaller now.
Yeah.
You know, flying to New York was a big
Ooh.
deal.
Whoa, yeah.
It was a big deal.
And you dressed in heels and pumps to do so back then. And now, you know,
You
no
did, you
telling
dressed and yeah.
what you're going to get
And you
on
could
the
smoke
plane.
cigarettes and drink on the plane.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So, wow, that's great. So I love that. Well, is there any other, you've got so many great stories. Is there one that you could tell us that just stands out in your mind as one of your favorite things that unusual?
Oh, goodness. There were a lot of those, but
I know you're good
I will
friends.
tell you a favorite story of my mother and why
Okay.
I write horror.
Okay.
And it's not really horror, it's more scary stories. So growing up, we loved horror movies. We watched Thriller, Boris Karloff's Thriller and The Twilight Zone and all those things. And we'd do it as a family. The only person who didn't participate was my father, who was a Yankee. He was from New York. And he thought we were all insane. So he didn't care for that. So he would just ignore us. But one night, I was home from college and I was reading a really scary book. And I grew up in an old house that really was haunted. And if you know how the old houses were, my bedroom shared a fireplace with my parents' bedroom. And there was a door between the rooms. So I'm in my bed and I'm reading and I'm scared. I'm really so scared I can't concentrate.
I'm just looking for the nurse. There sure are some beautiful paintings.
So I call out to my mother. She could hear me through the fireplace. She said, Mama, can I come sleep with you? I'm scared. And she said, aren't you in college? Like, well, yeah, but I'm still scared. And she said, okay, come on. So I fly into the bedroom and jump in bed with her. And it was one of those great nights where there was a full moon and there were Venetian blinds on the windows in her bedroom. And the moon was coming through those Venetian blinds and slats of black and white, black and white, black. And she's laying in the bed. And so I'm talking to her about the book I'm reading because I'm really scared and I want her to stay awake so that I don't have to be alone. And she's just laying there. She doesn't say anything. So I talk a little while, she doesn't say anything, and I finally like nudge her, like, Mama, are you awake? She doesn't move at all, doesn't move at all. I'm like, Mama, doesn't move at all. So I lean over her, and I'm leaning over her on one elbow, and I'm like, Mama. And she goes, who? You know? I levitated out of that bed, baby, and I ran on air into the bathroom and locked the door and slept in the bathroom.
Oh my God.
Because and she's knocking on the door. Sissy, I was just messing with you, Sissy. I'm like,
Oh my
go away.
gosh.
Go away.
Oh my gosh. That's a good
So you
story.
get your prankster little attitude from your mama.
Oh, she was terrible. I would have girls over to spend the night, and one of her greatest things, she had a Playtex glove, and she filled it with damp sand, and then she bent the fingers in the claws and froze it in the freezer, and then put it in the bed with us.
Oh my God. No wonder. That's funny. Oh man, that's great. That's great.
We had a lot of fun. It was a
What's
good
your mom?
childhood.
What was her name?
What
My
was your-
mother's name was Hilda Faye.
What was it?
Hilda Faye.
Hilda Faye. My grandmother immigrated from Sweden and Finland.
That's
Oh,
funny.
did y'all call her Hildy? Did anybody call her Hildy? Or did she? No, it was
Just
Hilda Faye.
Hilda or Mama.
Mama. Like I remember Mama.
Aw.
That's funny. Who? I love
That's
it.
so mean. That was mean. That was really mean. The
I
one
can-
person I could trust,
Oh my goodness.
possessed by Satan.
Gosh. Is there any, is your family home gone now? I mean, have you moved away?
Yeah, everyone is dead. My brother died this year.
So keeping the family legacy going. There you go. Well, that's awesome. Anybody else have any questions for Carolyn while she's here about the writing? Yes, Randy. Go ahead.
I do have a question. You brought up a couple of times that you consider yourself more of a storyteller than a writer. I was just, you might know Jody Thomas, I don't know. She's a friend of mine, and she thinks she's a storyteller. So we had this conversation around the table one night in Texas. But what do you see as the difference between a writer and a storyteller?
I think sometimes writers let language come between them and the story, but a storyteller always puts the story first. And we tell the story in the best way to honor the story, not to honor our skill or talent. The focus is always on the story, not on us.
Yeah.
That's
That makes
how I
sense.
say it.
That makes sense, because I guess everybody's probably read something where you just kind of read and it sounds beautiful, but then when you start dissecting it, it really doesn't mean anything and it's not advancing anything, but it sure sounds good until you stop and you start dissecting it, right?
When I was getting my master's, we had a teacher and we would read aloud the opening paragraph, and it was all about the language. We never got beyond the opening paragraph because plot was unimportant to him. Structure was unimportant to him. But if you really want to sell to a big publisher, plot and structure are everything. Now, that doesn't
Absolutely.
mean you can't have style. I mean, look at James Lee Burke, who is one of my favorite writers. The man is nothing but style and language, but he also has a story to tell.
And he can tell us, he can tell a story.
I have a James Lee Burke story to tell y'all.
Oh, good, good. I love him.
When I first read his works, I was so caught up. I just admired his writing so much. And I decided I was going to Louisiana to experience the Cajun lifestyle. Now, I grew up in a little town in Lucedale that has more churches than any other town. So no dancing, none of that. My parents weren't like that, but it didn't matter. Everybody else was. So I decided I'm going to Louisiana. I'm going to eat Cajun food and I'm going to learn the Cajun dance. And I talked my childhood friend, Diana, into going with me. So we had booked a room in Jeanerette at a bed and breakfast that was owned by this woman named Dawn Hebert. She was the 1956 Mardi Gras Queen of New Orleans, and her daddy was U.S. Senator Eddie Hebert, head of the Armed Forces committees and all of those. So we stayed in her little bed and breakfast. It's wonderful. It's right on the Bayou Teche. And I said, Dawn, we want to eat Cajun food and we want to learn the Cajun dance. And she said, okay, you go to Mulots for the food, watch them dance there. And then when you finish there, you go to this little place over in Breaux Bridge called La Poussière, which allegedly means sawdust. So we watched them dance. We watched them dance. And it looked like maybe we could learn it, maybe if somebody would teach us. So we go to the La Poussière in Breaux Bridge. We walked in the door, band at one end, bar at the other. We were now I was in my 30s. We were the only people there with a full set of teeth. And so, but they were dancing fools. And we didn't even get in the door before somebody asked us to dance. We stayed there from 10 o'clock till 2 in the morning, and we danced for hours. We danced mostly with this one table full of men. And at one point in time, Diana looked at me and she said, have you danced with the guy in the flannel shirt? And I said, yeah, well, no. And she said, I can't be certain, but I think he said he picks up cans for a living. I said, what do we care? We're not marrying them. We're just dancing. You know?
Oh,
We danced on. Couldn't understand hardly anything they said. I mean, you didn't have to make conversation. They'd talk to us, but I had no clue what they were talking about. We just danced on. And they had one woman at the table with us, and she had her leg propped up and had a bandage on it. And the guy, I thought he told me she was his wife, and she had hurt her leg, but she liked to watch the dancing. You know, I didn't really care. We weren't up to anything. We were just dancing. So we finished up, went back to the bed and breakfast, and the next night Dawn sent us somewhere else, and we ran into one of the little old ladies who'd been trying to teach us the dance steps. And she goes, oh, you girls are so kind. And I said, what do you mean? Because I mean, I'm not kind. What do you mean? And she said, you don't know, do you? I said, no, what? And she said, that table full of men you danced with all night, they were out on weekend pass from the mental institution. And I said, do you know where they are tonight? They were wonderful. They never fussed at us. They never complained or criticized us, even when we stomped their feet. They were so sweet.
Oh my
But
God.
that
Story down. Have you done that?
Oh, that is Louisiana.
Yes,
That
it
is why I love that state so much.
Me too, because I actually did a children's book selling dinner at Mulots, and we learned how to Cajun dance, and that is so funny. Oh my God, and they didn't
It's
have
fun.
Yeah, it's just fun. Oh my gosh, and I have Pulpwood Queens down in Bow Bridge. Louisiana. In fact, my former neighbor lives down there, Joyce Smith. So that I'm going to have to tell her that story. That's priceless. Man, you're right up there with Rick Bragman, honey, on those stories, because I'm telling you, between him and Pat Conroy, they would love that story. That's priceless, man. I hope everybody on Facebook enjoyed that tonight. That's good. I had not heard that one. That's really funny. So, oh my gosh. Well, we're looking forward to what you're going to share
And
with us.
say the guy in the flannel shirt was James Lee Burke. You
What about-
started it out saying that it was a James Lee Burke story. I
Well,
thought
it
that
was his influence.
that made
that
you
drove
go.
it.
Yeah, but when
mean,
you said that your
couple
friend
times
said the
He's such
flannel
a nice
shirt,
man.
You thought it was going to be James Lee Burke?
I thought it was going to be James Lee Burke.
Sorry. No, it's just the Louisiana that he paints so well in his book.
Yes, yes. I mean, and I got that when I realized that that was it. The whole time I'm like,
That's another sign of a
You were
good
dancing with
Southern
James Lee Burke?
storyteller, because they start you down a road that you think you know where you're going. And then the next thing you know, you've taken a detour to 4 or 5 other spots, but somehow you always get back to, that place you're going. So thank you, Carolyn. That's pretty amazing. Anybody else have any comments to make tonight? Oh, we are going to have so much fun. Now, Carolyn, you and Mandy are doing a panel at the weekend, is that correct?
That's correct.
2 master storytellers. We've got a seasoned pro and a young whippersnapper who's coming into the picture, and I am really excited about it. And then you're also going to have another panel too. Tell us about that one. About your
The trouble panel. I'm still working on that one. So let me be sure I get everybody lined up for it before we talk about it.
Well, I think we need to have a storytelling convention. What do you think?
I think that would be a lot of fun.
Wouldn't that be fun? Okay, Carolyn, you and Mandy and I are going to be talking about this. So thank you for joining us tonight. Now, if you guys did not know this, the Pulpit Queen presents her picks blog, daily blog. Carolyn is our featured author. She has some really great posts up there. This is another opportunity. It's on Facebook. You can get on there and ask her questions. And Carolyn, if anybody wanted to reach out to you and talk to you about anything, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
Probably email if you want to, like a personal, like a conversation or something, either texting or email. I honestly don't answer my phone anymore. I'm so tired of it. I hate my phone, but I will text,
Okay.
But my email is my name, Carolyn Haynes.
Haynes
21.
with an I.
21 at yahoo.com. And I'm always happy to talk about writing or the business or books or whatever. And I'm happy to share what I know, which is only what I know. It's not like the end all and be all.
Well, the wonderful thing about our group is it's all about the conversation, talking to the authors, and we bring our authors into everything that we do. And I cannot thank you enough, Carolyn and Mandy, for making this all possible. We love you. We're looking forward to it until we can all get together live again. It's going to be a week-long celebration, and Mandy's just about got the program done. And she has killed herself over this, y'all, but it's going to be exceptional. And we're winding it up, so we'll be getting it out there so everybody can see what we're doing. So thank you, Carolyn. Have a wonderful night. Now, where I'm at, I'm hoping I won't have any ghost experiences after your story, but I love it. I love it so much, and I thank you again. Any last messages for anybody that you want to share? Mandy, do we have anything else coming up? Last thing I guess I want to say is Saturday night, we're going to be back with a movie that Mandy recommended to me called Dean Stanley. And Mandy, you got to be there with me because Robert cannot be there on Saturday night. And we're going to be doing this wonderful movie I'd never seen before that Mandy brought to my attention that is a very unusual, how would you even describe it, Mandy? Dean Stan, is D-E?
It's Spanley. Like a
D-E-A-N Spanley. How would you describe this film? I can't describe it. It's got all the players in it, all the great actors.
and so many different layers of what that's, like it's a great storyteller's movie
It is.
because it's not just one thing. It's like a bunch of different, but Peter O'Toole's in it. And so
Yeah.
Peter O'Toole and his son, and one of his sons had died in the war. And he is just an old, bitter man. And his son that's still alive is just determined to connect with his father before it's too late.
We've got
Oh
a
my gosh.
Swami, we've got all kinds of characters, and Brian.
They talk about reincarnation, and then not like, oh, it's just so good. But there's one line. So, and the old man Peter O'Toole remembers when he was younger, he had a dog. He had a dog that he loved, and that's one thing that he could talk about. Well, Dean Spanley, and it's based on his screenplay. My Conversations with Dean Spanley is with the movie. There's a novel, and they made this movie. Is the reincarnated version of his dog.
You gotta watch it. Y'all join us. Wonder, did you have something you were gonna share?
Well, I have a question. Where can I get that movie? It's not on Netflix.
I think I watched it on Amazon or YouTube. It might have been on YouTube. I'll find out. I'll get back with you.
Really?
Yeah. Yes, Janet.
I just want to thank Carolyn. I was on Facebook first, but I like Zoom. But I want to thank you for what you said about storytelling and writing. I hope I'm a good storyteller, and it is trying to get past the verbiage you have on the page and getting down to the heart of the characters and all that. But
It's important to have your own style. I'm not dissing
oh yeah, I have
the
my
use of
own.
language at all.
Yeah, but I appreciate that because it's hard writing. And I'm amazed you're so fast. Unfortunately, I do get on social media while I'm trying to write. It does get
We all do.
annoying.
We all do.
But I say that I'm researching, so.
It's like eating sugar cookies.
Yes, it is. You can't eat just one. So thank you.
Before you know it,
They're all gone. Well, until next time, thank you for our newbies that have joined us and those that are coming back. Hi. Hello.
There's
Tor.
That's
That's my husband Tor, and my cat has been in
It's
and
good
out.
to meet you. So I hope you'll all join us again. This is being recorded. It will be on my Kathy L. Murphy channel. I'll get this all downloaded tonight and share it with everybody and get more people on board, because the more in the conversation, the more we get to hear great stories like Carolyn. So standing ovation. Here we go.
Thank you all so much for taking the time to come. I appreciate it.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
We'll see you next
Bye-bye.
time.
Thank you very much.
Bye, Carolyn. Bye, Kathy.
Bye,
Bye,
Carolyn.
Randy.
Andy.
Bye, Randy, Sarah.